Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this month's episode of Life and Leadership. Every month, we will release new content about the behind the scenes in our own lives and also talk about various leadership principles that we found to be beneficial in our life and ministry.
We're also excited to have the opportunity to talk to some of our good friends and fellow leaders during this segment of our podcast. This will help give us a wide range of perspectives from leaders that are doing incredible things in their own roles and contexts. Thanks for joining us.
Well, hey, here we are on our Life and Leadership podcast, and man, we're so thankful to have Rick Pearson, the man, the myth, the legend, with us.
Oh my!
I'm telling you, you're the GOAT of camp. It's so cool. And
thank you.
So school is going back this week, and so I think it's so powerful that you're here on this podcast today, and just because I think people will see you and they'll hear you, and they'll be reminded of a time when, man, God spoke this to me at camp. And I know, my time when I was a camp, a student at camp, I would go back to those binders. I still have them in my,
Awesome.
room, over there, where it's just like, I would go back and look at those truths that you preached on, and hard truths, good truths. But when I would get back in the school, man, temptations and other friends and family members were there, and I remember the truths that you spoke when I was a student. And I'm hoping that people will hear this and be so encouraged to go back and hear, or look at their notes and think of what the Lord spoke to them about. But man, I just want to say, for me, Madi can't be with us today; she's working. But man, for me, you have made such an impact on my life, and I know thousands of students' lives. But man, for me, I'm eternally grateful for that. And I know I've known you 10 years now, which is crazy. You're like, yeah, let me tell you. But I know Madi would say the same. She's here, just the impact you've made on her. And so, man, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Oh man, it is a blessing and an honor to be here, and it's a joy to watch you in your calling and how you've answered that, and it's exciting, and for me to believe that somehow in a tiny little way I had a part in that is, oh man, there's no greater joy. So thanks for having me.
That means a lot, man. So good. Just for the audience who don't know you and don't know Camp Table Rock, I think most people do, that are in my circle, know about you and Camp Table Rock, but we have people from all over listening to this and watching, and they don't know what Camp Table Rock is. Can you tell us what that is?
Absolutely. Camp Table Rock is a non-denominational, non-for-profit organization that we founded a number of years ago. I think we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Dedicated to reaching the youth of America for Jesus Christ. Amen. And our primary mission is that we would equip students to be missionaries on their mission field. You just spoke about they're going back to school this week. Yeah. That is their primary mission field. And I feel like that we're really good at going other places and doing mission work, places far away, like where people don't know us. We're probably never going to see them again. Yeah. And that's important. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. Of course we should. Those people need Jesus, and we need to go. But we are called to the mission field that we're on every single day. And that's our schools. That's our communities. That's our homes. That's where we work, our neighborhoods. And Camp Table Rock is committed to equipping students to be effective on that mission field every day. And so that we do that through our discipleship, evangelism, and leadership training program.
Wow. And that's every summer, right?
Every summer.
And you have periodically events throughout the year, right?
Yeah.
If people churches can partner with you guys. So if someone's listening to this, be like, man, I want to go on a fall retreat, or I want to have my own event, they can partner with you guys,
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah. We do a number of off-season events.
Yeah.
Right now we have a rugged men's retreat coming up in September, and then we have a 3-to-1 women's retreat in October, and then we have a one-night, one-day youth event called Encounter in November. And then we started last year doing this college event in January.
That's so cool.
We're definitely there, and we just want to serve and have that place used for God's glory.
Yeah. We can, put a link to your website on this channel. But man, I just think it's so important for people to be able to see this campground, because I've been to a lot of campgrounds, and nothing against other camps or anything like that. If someone's listening to this and they think I'm putting their campground down, I'm not. But man, I'm telling you, there's no place like CTR. And I know you've heard that a million times, and at times maybe you think that people are just saying that to you, but I'm telling you, I've spoken at many retreats and many camps. Dude, there's no place like CTR. And I know I'm biased. I know I'm a Joplin District guy in the Church of the Nazarene, but man, I just want to tell you, like your heart and your leadership is unbelievable. And man, I'm so thankful for you and Rhonda and all that has, happened just throughout the years. And how many students would you say on a, throughout the summer would come to CTR?
On an average, probably around 2,700 or so a summer.
Wow.
And of course, we've grown to that number over
Right.
the years. This year being COVID year, that was greatly reduced, probably
Right.
reduced by about a third, maybe.
Yeah.
And I look at 2,700, and each one of those is a pebble in the pond.
Yeah.
So each one of those, it goes home back to their schools, communities, homes, and they have that ripple effect.
Wow.
And so I get excited when I think about 2,700 pebbles hitting the pond and the
Right.
ripple effect going out and God's
Right.
kingdom growing that way.
You're equipping missionaries. You are.
That's our goal. That's our
Yes,
mission. So, yeah.
absolutely. And what's amazing, just a testament to your leadership as get ready to dive in. But COVID happens, and the truth is, a lot of campgrounds had to shut down and just couldn't make it.
Yes.
And I'm not saying it wasn't tough. I know it was tough for you guys.
Yeah.
You guys kept going. You kept sailing.
We did. And I felt, believe me, we didn't take it lightly.
Yeah.
And we prayed hard about it and thought hard about it. But I also tried to look at it from just a logical standpoint. And so here's what I found out, that when you break all the numbers down, the actual percentage chance of a student coming
Yeah.
to CTR,
Yeah.
contracting COVID-19 and subsequently passing away from that was 230 thousandths of 1%.
Right.
That's the risk factor,
Right.
okay? But I have a drawer in my desk full of notes from students that said, Rick, I'm alive today.
Wow.
Because I came to your camp. I was in despair. I was ready to end my life. I know that there are hundreds of kids today that are alive because they met God at camp.
Yeah.
I know there's thousands and thousands of kids today that are not doing drugs and alcohol or maybe involved in other destructive activities
Right.
because they met God at camp. That's real.
Amen.
The risk of not having camp
Yeah.
was far, far greater than having it. So we went forward and did it. And we took some criticism.
Right.
We did.
That's part of leadership.
But absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's part of serving God.
Amen.
But man, I had parents calling me
Yeah.
saying, please don't cancel your camp. Please don't cancel your camp.
Parents.
Yeah, parents.
Wow.
They're like, I'm not worried about this virus killing my kid. I'm worried about me killing my kid. If I don't get him out of this
Right.
house, I'm going to,
Right.
And I had a pastor from a small community in Kansas. I won't name the community, but he called me in early May.
Yeah.
And he was begging me, Rick, don't cancel camp. Please do not cancel camp. And I said, I don't plan to. And he said, I've got to get some kids there. He said, we've had 3 teenage suicides in our little tiny community of 1,200 people since March.
Wow.
He said, you've got to have camp. I've got to get kids there. And he brought quite a group of kids and spoke to him on the phone yesterday and how he continues to minister to them, and he knows that it's made an impact in their lives.
I appreciate you sharing that, because no matter what, man, us who are in leadership positions, right? We all have leadership. It's, looks different for each person, but there's always going to be consequences, positive or negative. And you just got to live with it, and you try to seek the Lord and hear his voice. But at the end of the day, you're never going to make everyone happy. And you just got to do it. And, this life and leadership segment, man, I just appreciate your experience and wisdom. And knowing, listen, you've been doing this a long time and you've never encountered something quite like this before.
Nope.
This is different. And so I think that's good for people to hear. Just because you've done it a long time doesn't mean that you've experienced it all. Right. You got to be ready. And, obviously you're a man of God and we're faith people, but, going back to leadership, and you've got to know that, hey, this is where we're headed and this is what we're going to do. And we just got to live with that, and I think that's powerful.
Yeah, you got to stay on course.
You do.
And we're going to talk more about that as we move along, I'm sure. But you have to, life is not a sprint.
Right.
It's a marathon. Serving God isn't necessarily a sprint. There's days you have to sprint, but it's a marathon. It's constantly trusting and waiting upon him. And you set your sights on the goal, and then you do not give up along the way.
That's good. And that's the perfect transition, because that's what I want to talk about here today, man. Waiting on God. The word waiting, just me saying that makes me want to vomit, because it's not a good word in my vocabulary, right? Man, I was thinking this the other day, like McDonald's, for instance. I mean, think about it. You drive up, you tell them what you want and what you don't want.
Yeah.
You get up there, you're still in the car, you give them the card to pay, then you go up and you get your food. Like, that's so normal to us now, but think about it, that is insane.
Yeah.
That we, have that now.
Yeah.
And, we live in a, this microwave oven type of, culture today. But man, it hasn't always been like that. And I know my generation, man, we're just accustomed to it. Matter of fact, right now, it's not fast enough. How do we get it faster? How do we do these things quicker? And, waiting on God, it can be tough. And so we have culture, but then there's waiting on God, where the Lord speaks something, and then it's like, okay, we want it today, because that's what we're accustomed to. And, I like to say, if I'm preaching sometimes on waiting, it's like, listen, just because God gives you the revelation on Sunday doesn't mean that the blessing and fulfillment of that happens on Monday.
Right.
It feels so good to preach.
Yeah.
And then you're the one that's going through it, and you're like, Lord, why have you forsaken me?
No fun to live.
You know what I'm saying? But man, I know your story, and many people know your story, but there's so many that don't. And we see Camp Table Rock now. I'm just be honest. It's unbelievable. It's breathtaking. Your camp is one of the best camps in the entire world, right? And I say that.
I'm biased, but yes, you're right on, man.
But it is, man. Camp Table Rock. Make sure to sign up, this summer. But like, it is. I'm just being honest. I mean, the spirit and all of that. I mean, that, like, absolutely, the spiritual side's there, but then you guys have all these activities, and it's just it's mind-boggling. And I'm so blessed to be able to be a part of it. Hasn't always been the story, though. You didn't just inherit. You got the Mastercraft shirt on, right? You didn't just have all these boats, right? And how many boats do you guys have?
Well, we have 10 Mastercrafts and a couple of fishing boats.
If that doesn't, want you to go to Camp Table Rock, I don't know what does, right? But it's just magnificent. And so for me, man, I'm a church planner. I'm an evangelist. So there's like this spiritual entrepreneurship within me. And I know a lot of my friends, a lot of people who listen to this, and we can get this excitement when the Lord calls us to do something. And here we go, and we're ready for that. But especially my generation, it's not just us, but man, when God speaks something to us or shows us something, we think, okay, that means the fulfillment of that happens overnight. And man, as I was praying about, waiting on God and who to talk to, man, you came, to my mind immediately, and I'm like, I don't know if you would even be able to do that, but man, here you are today, and I'm so thrilled. I would love for you just to share the camp story, because I can't think of a better example of waiting on God than that.
I'd love to. I'd love to share the story.
Amen.
I've probably done it 1,000 times. I don't know. And I'll just say this: for a while, there was a number of years where I stopped sharing the story at camp, because I thought, man, everyone's heard this. It's old news, whatever.
Yeah.
And then one of my board members a number of years ago said, Rick, never stop sharing the story.
That's so
never. Good. And it's because it brings glory to God. It's the power of God at work. Anyway, so I'd love to do that. And you talk about waiting on God. Okay, this is where the rubber met the road for me, and it still does. We were talking before we started the podcast, but that waiting on God, it can be a season, but the truth is it's a life. You gotta keep trusting day by day. And some of the life, sometimes are desert, some of them are mountaintops, some of it's on the beach, and some of it's in the woods. It's just that's just how it is. And it's difficult. But for me, 35 years ago, God put it on my heart to build a camp on Table Rock Lake. And I was serving as a volunteer youth worker with the youth group in Topeka, Kansas, had recently given my life back to Christ, recently felt a call into ministry, didn't even know what that meant. I didn't think, well, how could God call me? A loser from Nowheresville, North Dakota, a dysfunctional family. My dad's been married 4 times, all this stuff, and sin in my past, and, all this. And yet, oh, wow. When Jesus died on the cross, he truly did pay it all.
Amen.
And when I surrendered to him and he forgave me, and then called me in the ministry, as much as I thought this can't be happening, it did. And the youth pastor at our church said, hey, we're going on a trip down to Table Rock Lake for our youth group for the this summer. He said, would you and your wife want to come as sponsors? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
So took my only week's vacation I had for the whole year of my job. And we went down there with them. And I'll tell you what, when we arrived at Table Rock Lake, now I grew up in the frozen tundra of North Dakota, okay?
Yeah.
All right?
It's cold.
And it's cold, it's flat, and there's it's just the tundra.
Yeah.
And you go to Table Rock Lake in June, you literally think, I have died and gone to heaven.
Right.
And I thought, this is it. There cannot be anything more beautiful in the universe. And I was just amazed by that. But what even amazed me more was what I saw God do in the lives of those kids that week. It was powerful and life-changing. And we're sitting there having service one night, and all of a sudden, the youth pastor is speaking a message, and all of a sudden, like, his lips are moving, but I don't hear anything. It's just like everything went silent. And I just felt God say, Rick, I want you to build a youth camp on this lake to reach young people for me.
Wow.
And
and how long was that after you felt that you wanted to go into the ministry?
Oh, not long. I would say maybe 6 months after I felt the call into ministry. And no, I did not want to go into the ministry. Let me tell you, I was like, this can't be real. But I knew my call was real, and I knew it was a divine call, not just something I thought, well, this might be something to do in life. That wasn't it for me at all.
Right.
I really felt it was a divine call of God, and the voice that I heard when I was called, and I'm not that guy that I heard this clear voice. No, I don't, and I really wish God would write things on a wall with a Sharpie because it'd be a lot easier for all of us.
Exactly.
But He doesn't do that. But the voice that I felt in my head, in my heart, at Table Rock Lake, it sounded like the same voice, and so I'm like, this has got to be God. And I was so excited, and there I was, just a young man, just in my early 20s, and I was so excited that God had called me to do this. So I went and told the people who own the resort we stayed at, a little resort called Whippoorwill Resort.
Okay.
And it's still there today. And Jack and Margaret Gilmore are the owners, and they were there 35 years ago. They're still there today.
Wow.
And I thought they were old back then. They've got to be like 150 now. Anyway, and I go to Jack and Margaret, and I'm like, God called me to build a youth camp on this lake to reach young people for Him. Would you just give me your resort, and I'll start tomorrow? I was just that excited and that naive, And they're like, that's great. No, we're not doing that.
Wow.
But Jack, I must have kept bugging him because like a day later, he said, hey, there's some property down the lake that we think would be a perfect place for you to build your youth camp. Right. And I really think he just wanted to get me off his back.
Right.
I really do, because I was probably driving him nuts.
Yeah.
And so he and his wife, Margaret, took me out to this land. And it was nothing but like a jungle, And I get out of the car and I start walking around, and I was just like, I swear the angels were singing in the background, because it was just like, this is it. I mean, it's just, and I just felt this overwhelming sense. This is the place.
Really?
Well, I fought my way down to the shore, which was quite a ways through all this brush and trees and snakes and everything else. And I piled some rocks up on the shore because I thought, I don't want to, lose where this place is. And it'd be a lot easier to find it in a boat on the lake than it would be driving out there, because it was a terrible drive. It wasn't even a gravel road. It was like 2 ruts in the road to get out there. It was really rough. So went back to Whippoorwill, asked some of the kids in my youth group, my leadership kids, you want to go on a boat ride? They're like, yeah. So we took off, and I didn't even know if I'd find that pile of rocks, because Table Rock Lake is huge. There's 800 miles of shoreline on Table Rock Lake, but we found it.
Wow.
And we pulled the boat up on shore. We got out, and we made a little cross out of sticks the best we could, and tied it up with some vines, and we set it in that pile of rocks. And we held hands, we gathered around, we held hands, and we prayed, God, would you give us this land for youth camp?
Wow.
Well, I'm so excited. We go back home to Topeka, and I wrote a letter to everyone I think I'd ever met in my whole lifetime. And it said, God called me to build a youth camp at Table Rock Lake. Send me money. I got to buy this land. I got to buy this land.
Yeah.
And the land was for sale for $18,000 at that time. And I know what happened? Nothing.
Wow.
Not one single person responded to my letter. Not one even sent me $1.
They weren't hearing from the Lord.
Well, I think they were.
Exactly. No, I was just
because
messing.
part of this waiting on God never has us wait just because he has the power to do that.
Yeah.
He has a purpose.
That's so good, man.
And let me tell you what, he had a purpose, and I was in no way ready. I know, but I didn't know that then. I know that now. But I was so excited. All I knew is God called me to do this, and what could be greater than to move down to paradise, heaven on earth, and build this youth camp.
Right.
So I was pretty discouraged, obviously. But shortly after that, the youth pastor resigned, went on to be a senior pastor, and the church said, hey, Rick, you're in charge of the youth group now. And so I became a volunteer youth pastor, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
And kudos out there to all the volunteer youth pastors.
Amen.
Man, it's tough. It's tough being a full-time paid youth pastor, let alone being a volunteer. We got a job and a family. And I was working 55 hours a week at an automotive parts warehouse, driving to Kansas City and back 2 nights a week from Topeka to take my Bible college classes because, you got to take those. You're called to be a preacher, right? So you got to do that. And then had this youth group that God blessed in unbelievable ways. And I don't have time to go into all that story, but started out.
I just think that's so important, though, not to interrupt you, but like, I think a lot of people say, hey, God called me to the ministry, so I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to quit everything. I'm just going to move to that lake and just wait. But man, you kept working. Oh. You kept serving.
Yeah. We would have starved to death. I mean, where are you going to move to the lake? I mean, it was
right.
I guess maybe growing up in North Dakota and working on farms and whatever, I learned a really strong work ethic, and I also learned to be really practical and logical.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying I always am. I'm not like saying I got it all going on, but you learn certain things, and it didn't make any sense to me for whatever reason. I felt like I just need to continue serving God today with all my heart, where I'm at.
That's so good.
And you've heard that statement, bloom where you're planted.
Yeah.
And that little youth group, I started out with maybe about 15 kids.
Wow.
I served there 9 years. And when I left, we had 180 on our roll, and we would run over 100 kids on Wednesday nights.
I think that's so important for our audience to hear, though.
Yeah, and although every day I thought about what God had called me to do at Table Rock Lake, and it was there, and I prayed about it, and so every year when it came time for a summer trip, we went back to Whippoorwill Resort on Table Rock Lake.
Wow.
Every year we'd get in a boat and go over to that place where we pile those rocks and put that cross. And
was that frustrating for you?
Oh yeah. It was. I mean, I'm just like, I was frustrated and I was confused because I'm like, why would God call me? And then here I am.
You're preaching
all these years later, still waiting for him to fulfill this call in my life. I didn't know it then. I know it now that every single thing that I went through during these years, God was teaching me and growing me in ways that if I hadn't have been taught those things and grown in those ways, I would have absolutely failed at that ministry, the camp ministry. I know that. I know that now. Back then, it was like, what?
You can't see it while you're going through it.
No, you never do.
That's so good.
No, you don't. But I just kept serving God and just kept doing my best to love these kids and share Christ with them and grow God's kingdom. And over the years, hundreds of kids came to know Christ through that ministry, but we'd always go back to Table Rock Lake every year for our summer trip, go over to that place. Sometimes we could pull the boat up, depending on the lake level, and we prayed on the land again. Other times we just had to stay in the boat. But after 8 years of doing that, 8 years.
Not 8 days.
8 years, yeah. 8 years that when you're that age and you're waiting on God to do something, it seemed like 800 years.
Right.
But after 8 years, we go back there one year, and there's a dock down there, right on that land, right where that land is.
Wow.
And I'm like, someone's on my land. What are they doing?
Right.
Someone's on the land where I'm supposed to build this camp. So I pulled my boat in the dock, and I walked up the hill, and I met this guy named Joe. Mm-hmm. And Joe had built a little tiny resort there. It was called Pine Cove Lodge. And he had 4 little cabins. And he had just rent them out to people. And so we put a dock in down there as well. And I'm like, Joe, this is where God called me to build a youth camp. I'm Rick Pearson. I'm from Topeka, Kansas. And I left him my home number and because that's all you had back then was the landline. There wasn't cell phones weren't there yet, and computers weren't there yet. And I'm like, dude, Joe, you got to call me if you ever sell this place. You got to call me because this is where God called me to build a youth camp.
Yeah.
Now, Joe was one of them guys that you could tell in about 3 seconds.
Yeah.
He did not have anything to do with God, Jesus, religion in general.
Right.
He just was like, oh, you're religious peoples, you know, and he really thought that I was kind of arrogant to think that that's where I was going to build my youth camp.
Wow.
But I couldn't help it. It's what God told me.
Right.
And so I wanted to share that with Joe.
And he owned the land, right?
Actually his father-in-law who lived in New Jersey owned it, but he and his wife lived there and ran this little resort.
Okay.
And so every year, so I spent 9 years in ministry in Topeka, Kansas, 2.5 Dallas, Texas, 2.5 Oskaloosa, Iowa, 2 years Indianapolis, Indiana, and then pastored my own church as a senior pastor in St. Joe, Missouri for 3.5 years. Okay. Well, all that time, every year took my youth group back to Table Rock Lake.
Wow.
And I never once stopped believing that this is what God had called me to do.
Wow.
I told everyone I ever met that God called me to build a youth camp at Table Rock Lake. This is what I'm going to do. And I told everybody that. And so finally in 1997, I'm serving as a youth pastor at Indy First Church, the Nazarene, in Indianapolis, Indiana. And there we founded Fun in the Sun SON Ministries, a non-for-profit, non-denominational organization. And we got our 501c3. And I began, the closest I could come to fulfilling this call upon my life was we rented out resorts. And if you ever been to camp and jumped off the cliff, if you just look to the south of there, there's a marina there called Baxter Marina. Up on the bluff behind it, there's 5 resorts. And I'd rent those resorts out, set up a huge tent. I had to hire people to set it was huge, the size of our chapel now. Wow. And we built stages in there and video screens, lights, sound system, everything. And we'd hold camp for 1 week of summer.
Wow.
That was the closest I could come to fulfilling this.
And that was while you were in Indianapolis still? And you come there.
That's when we first started, held our very first camp under the tent and rented those resorts.
And you could see the land that you wanted from the distance or no?
No, it wasn't far. It was probably about 4 miles by boat.
Was that hard for you? Was that discouraging or were you excited? To be doing what you're doing?
A combo of both of those things, to tell you the truth. Because I was excited that we're at least having a camp there. But I felt like it was a far cry from what God really called me to do. And we, that land, Joe was still on the land with his little resort.
Yeah.
And so in 1998, I moved to St. Joe, Missouri, and began pastoring my own church there. And we continued to do camps the 1 week of summer down there at Baxter. And it was in, I believe, 1999, my daughter invited a friend from school to come to camp with her. His name was Chad. Chad came to camp that summer, and Chad met the Lord Jesus Christ as his personal Lord and Savior. And it was the real deal. It was a transformation. Chad started attending our church when we got back home. And a year later, Chad graduated from high school. Yeah. And he invited me to his house for his graduation reception party. And so I went, and that's where I met his mom and dad, Dave and Terry, for the first time. And Chad's dad, Dave, was just like, oh, Rick, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And then he said something that always kind of makes me cringe, but I knew what he meant. He goes, thank you for saving my boy. I'm like, whoa, I don't save anybody. Right. Jesus does the saving part, He
used you, though.
Yeah, he did. And I said, but I just do this camp, Yeah. And he's like, well, I want to know more about this camp ministry you have. And I said, okay. So a couple weeks later, I met with Dave in his office. And Dave's a contractor guy. He builds huge Pepsi Cola plants, things like that, Johnson Control plants, things like that. And Dave said to me, what's your greatest need? And I said, to have a place. I said, God has called me to do this full time in my life. Now you got to understand, from the time that we first prayed on that property till I met with Dave in his office, 16 years has gone by. 16 years has gone by. And Dave says, okay, I've got a building for sale in downtown St. Joe, and if I can sell this building for the price I'm asking, maybe I can help you. Well, I was excited, but a bit skeptical, because over that 16 years, several other people had said similar things to me, like, oh yeah, I think God's told me to help you. One guy, literally, I'm not even kidding you, not even kidding. We were talking on the phone one day. He said, your check's in the mail. He goes, God told me I'm supposed to help you. 3 weeks later, when the check didn't ever arrive, I called him back. And he said, I'm so sorry. Something happened in my business and I couldn't send it.
No way.
Yeah. And I was just like, so when Dave said this to me,
you're
I was
skeptical.
excited, but skeptical at the same time.
How many times, I'm just curious, because I've never got to ask you this, like, because I hear the story from afar. I'm like, oh man, I wish I could talk to him, more in depth. And here I am. I get this opportunity.
You can.
How many times throughout this process did you just feel like giving up on that dream?
Oh, my stars. How many stars are there?
Exactly.
I don't even know.
I mean, was it something like, Lord, did I miss it? Because I think sometimes God speaks to us, and then discerning the will of God is hard sometimes.
Yes, it is.
It's like, just listen to the Lord, read, pray, fast. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There's a place for that. But then sometimes, I don't know. I thought I heard him, maybe not.
Oh, man.
I mean,
I don't know how many. It had to be in the thousands, probably. Because Satan works.
Yeah.
There's days that he's literally would use that to beat the crap out of me.
Wow.
He just would do it because he's like, yeah,
you missed it.
You missed it. And that's all about to come to a head, my story here, let me tell you. So we go through that fall or that summer, and we're coming up on Labor Day after I met with Dave.
Yeah.
And Chad calls me and says, Rick, you need to call my dad. He's going to be at the lake over Labor Day and see if he wants to look at property with you for your camp. Because the place that I'd felt God had called me to build it had never come back up for sale or anything.
Right.
And so I thought, well, that, I must have not heard God right when I really felt it was that place. But, you doubt yourself.
Right.
How many times do we do that? And, of course, many times I doubted that I even heard the call to begin with. What is wrong with me?
Right.
And there were times in ministries like, God, did you really call me?
Right.
Because right now I feel like I'm about the biggest loser you ever put on this earth,
Yeah.
And God picks me up, dusts me off, and we keep going.
Good. It's real.
And, I think the saints are those who fall down, they just get back up. We just get back up. We refuse to stay down. And anyway, so I call up Dave, and he said, yeah, why don't we go do that? So I used to do a youth leaders retreat over Labor Day and help train youth workers. And so after that was over, I called Dave, and for 2 days, I rode in the back seat of a realtor's car. And that person should have never been given a driver's license. Those curvy, windy roads where they're like, and you just get
terrible
motion sick so bad. I was green for 2 days.
Right.
We looked at land all over the lake. Everywhere, and nothing was right. Nothing was going to work. Wrong zoning, couldn't have a dock, wrong lay of the land, not enough land, whatever. It was nothing would work. So finally, at the end of the second day, I said to Dave, well, would you like to see the place where God told me I'm supposed to build the youth camp? And Dave is a super nice guy.
Yeah.
And you know how people can... just by their look, say a lot without ever using words. Okay. So when I said that to Dave, here's what the look said. Dave never said a word, but the look said, you got to be kidding me. Now you're telling me that after 2 days, why didn't you tell me this earlier?
Right.
And so I knew that's what he was thinking. So I said, well, it's not for sale. He said, I don't care. Let's go look at it.
Right.
So we get in my boat in Shell Knob, and we drive out, we pull in the dock, we walk up the hill, and we talk to Windy Joe.
He was out there.
Yeah, Windy Joe was still there. And I call him Windy Joe because Windy Joe is that guy that he could tell you a lie way quicker than he can tell you the truth. Like, you just knew it, He's just one of those guys. And anyway, and so we look around a little bit, and we go back home.
Yeah.
So we go through the rest of that fall and winter, and we come up. It's January of 2001. And 16 and a half years has gone by since we prayed on that property. And I'm going to tell you, this is where it came to a head for Rick Pearson. I was tired. Yeah. We had done camp under the tent for 4 years at that time, coming up on our 5th. I was exhausted. I was trying to pastor a church, and things were going well in the church, I thought. But yet, I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired. I'm broke. I'm discouraged. And I'm like, okay, God, here's the deal. I'm doing a fundraiser. And Lord, if you don't raise $100,000 in this fundraiser, then I'm going to take that as a sign from you that I am not supposed to do this camp ministry, that I was wrong, I missed it, and I will lay it down. We'll do camp one last time this summer because it's already planned, and then I'm done. I will just serve you as a pastor. It was.
Yeah.
And I don't, when I read about Gideon doing that, I'm like, you idiot, what are you testing God for?
Right.
And of course, when I did it, I'm sure God was thinking, you idiot, why are you doing this? And I'm not saying that's how you should do it. I'm just being honest. That's just what I did. I just was like, I am tired, and God, you've got to show me in some significant way that you're still in this, or I am done.
I love it.
And so I set the deadline for the fundraiser for the week before Easter, because we had pastor's retreat in Branson and then Easter, and I wanted it all settled by then. So I sent out letters once again to everyone I think I'd ever met in my whole life. Now, I had told thousands of people over these 17 years that God had called me to build a youth camp at Table Rock Lake. And the letter basically said, this is what God has called me to do. I ask that you would pray and obey.
Yeah.
And then I put a self-addressed stamped envelope in there so that I would know, if what they were when they came back.
Right.
Because if I got responses this time. People sent them back in, but I did not open them. And I took a cardboard box, covered it in duct tape, cut a slot in the top.
You didn't open them.
No, didn't
How
open
come?
them. Well, because I heard about a missionary from Africa doing this once. Okay.
Yeah.
And it worked for him, so I wanted to just do the same thing. Okay. And he didn't open his till the last day.
I love it.
Yeah. He had just hours left before he had to go in and make a payment on this building for Bible college. And he didn't open them either till the morning of what's due in a few hours. And he opens it up. He had more than enough money. He bought the building, put the Bible college there in Nairobi, Kenya, and still there today.
I never heard that.
Okay, well, it's an awesome story.
Wow.
Awesome story. But I thought if some missionary from Africa can do it, so can this dude from North Dakota.
I love it.
So I didn't open them, and I put them in this box, and every day I would pray over that box. I kept it in my furnace room in my basement. I called that room my Holy of Holies.
Yeah.
And I'd go in there, and I would pray over that box. I mean, sometimes, I prayed in a way I'd never do in front of anyone else, on my face, before God, just begging him, Lord, please, there's got to be $100,000 in this box. You've got to show me that I didn't miss this for 17 years. You've just got to do. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. Anyway, finally the day of the deadline came.
Okay.
And I prayed one last time, cut the box open, opened the envelopes, and tallied the checks that we had received. And when all was said and done, we had raised just a little more than $11,000. Now, okay, $11,000 is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, and I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but it's a long ways from $100,000, and you're just not going to start a camp with $11,000.
Right.
And little did I know, you're probably not going to start one with $100,000. But I just thought, to me, that was more money in the whole world.
Exactly.
So
that's a lot.
Got to raise that. It's got to be. He's got to be in this. So I began at that moment to dive deep into what I call a pity party. Those parties you have and no one else comes, and you're just miserable and mad at everyone. It's everyone else's fault. And I mean, I am just literally starting to just whine to God. Like, God, I can't believe that you did this. I cannot believe. I've told everyone I met for 17 years, Pastor Rick was called to build a youth camp. They're going to think, what a loser. They're not going to even believe in me anymore, because I told everyone this is what you called me to do. And it's over. It's over.
Right.
And so I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I thought, I'm going to call Wendy Joe, and I'm going to tell Wendy Joe that he'd just be happy and blessed in Jesus if he'd just give me that land down there and let me build my youth camp.
Yeah.
So I call up Wendy Joe.
Is that the same day?
Oh, yeah. Within an hour of probably after I bawled and cried and whined and who knows what all else stupid things I did. It took me a while to really get worked up into my pity party. But I don't know why I had that thought, but I just called him. And, Wendy Joe had no love for God or anything like that. He had no passion for the kingdom work. And I called him up, and he starts in to tell me his fish stories, which I'm pretty sure most of them are not even close to being true. And he's talking about the weather, whatever. I don't even get a chance to ask him if he'll give me the land. And he says to me, and he had this old hillbilly accent, you know. He goes, "When you and that feller was down here last fall, you got me and my wife a thinking." And I'm like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, we decided we'd sell the place, and it looks like we got it sold." And I'm like, "Joe, you gotta be kidding me." Because once he moved in there, which would have been about 8 years earlier, 9 years earlier, every year I stopped in there and talked to him. Every year. And I gave him, when the cell phones came out, he had my cell phone number, he had my email address, my home number, my church office number. And I was like, "Joe, you got to call me if you ever sell this, because this is where God called me to build my youth camp." And he knew it. So at that moment, when he said, "We decided to sell it, and it looks like we got it sold," if I could have punched him in the face through the phone, I think I would have done it. I mean, yeah, and then ask God to forgive me for that later. I mean, but seriously, I was just so angry. I'm like, "Joe, how could you do that? You knew that's where I'm supposed to build my youth camp." And here's what he said to me. He goes, "I didn't tell you or didn't call you because I knew you didn't have any money." And man, that made me mad. I mean, I was just furious. It made me mad really for two reasons. One, he was right. For whatever reason, it's just no fun when Wendy Joe's right. It just isn't any fun.
Oh, man.
But two, no, I didn't have any money, but I just happened to know the one who has it all.
That's right.
And I didn't know at the time, but then he explains, "Yeah, my father-in-law who owns the property lives in New Jersey. He has the contract on the offer. We're just waiting for him to sign it and send it back in to the real estate office in Shell Knob, and it's a done deal. It'll be sold."
Wow.
And I wanted to say a lot of things to Wendy Joe right then that I knew the Lord Jesus would not be pleased with, and I didn't say them, and I said, "Okay, whatever." I hung up and then probably said, "You're an idiot." And so now it's really over.
Wow.
It's really, we only raised
16 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost 17 by the time we get to this point. Yeah, we're just a couple of months away from 17 years since we first prayed on the property.
Wow.
And so I'm just like, we only raised $11,000. They went ahead and decided to sell the property. It looks like it's sold. And now I'm diving deeper into this pity party, deeper and deeper and deeper. I'm already just thinking of all the thousands of people I told I'm going to build this youth camp. All these people every year taking my youth group there. Everyone knew.
Wow.
And I was just, feeling sorry for myself. Like, God, why would you even put me through this?
Right.
Why? I've tried to faithfully serve you all these years. Why would you do this? And so I thought, okay, I need to make one more call. I need to call Dave. Because Dave did show interest, and he'd been very kind and spent a lot of time with me. I need to call and tell him the results of the fundraiser.
Right.
And tell him that they decided to sell the land. It looks like it's sold. So I called Dave, and I told him those things. And I said to him, I guess it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
So then Dave, the contractor dude, has the audacity to say to me, the preacher dude,
right.
"Well, I don't know what you're worried about, because if God wants you to have it, you're going to have it."
Wow.
And I didn't want to hear that. When you're in the depths of your pity party, don't tell me something spiritual like that.
Exactly.
I was just like, when he said that, I wanted to say, "Why don't you just shut up?"
Yeah.
And I didn't say that, but Dave's a super nice guy. And I said, yeah, you're right. And I got to go, bye.
Right.
And so I get in my Jeep, and I'm just driving around St. Joe. I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to talk to anyone. I am bawling my eyes out. I'm sure really talking to God in a very whiny, poor me, I can't believe you did this to me type attitude. And finally my car's about out of gas. So I put gas in it, go in to pay for it, come back out. My cell phone's beeping. I have a message. And I listen to it, and it's Dave. And he goes, "Hey, Rick."
You have a cell phone now.
Oh, yeah.
At the beginning of the story, you didn't have a cell phone.
Oh, no.
Now you do.
Well, yeah. It's funny what happens in technology over 17 years,
I love it.
You go from writing on a stone with a stick, to cell phones. But anyway.
I love it.
Yeah, and it's Dave. He goes, "Rick, this is Dave. You got yourself a piece of property down there in southern Missouri. Give me a call." I'm like, what is he talking about? So I call him up and go, "Dave, this is Rick. What's going on?" He said, "Yeah, you got yourself a piece of property down there in southern Missouri." And I'm thinking in my mind at that moment, like, okay, did one of the places we look at he decided was right, or what is he talking about? Southern Missouri is a large landmass,
Right.
And can you be more specific? And he said, call this realtor. He'll fill you in on the details. He said, by the way, can you deliver some earnest money to Shell Knob tomorrow? And I said, yeah, I'm going to pastor's retreat in Branson. I can do that. And he said, okay, stop by my office first thing in the morning. I'll give you a check. So I called this realtor up, and he said, yeah, Dave has called and offered 100% full asking price for the Pine Cove Lodge property, which that was the land we'd prayed on. And I said, well, I thought it was sold. And he said, well, not technically, because the owner, who lives in New Jersey, has not yet signed the current contract on the current offer and faxed it back into me. So until I get that, it's not sold.
Wow.
And I said, did you call and tell him there's a better offer? Because I'm sure the guy didn't offer 100% full asking price. And the guy goes, no, I cannot do that. And I go, why not? He said, I cannot notify the owner of a new offer until the earnest money is in my hand. It's a Missouri real estate law. And I said, well, that's about the dumbest thing I've ever heard of in my whole life. You kidding me? And I said, well, I'm in Shell Knob, or in St. Joe. I can't get to Shell Knob until tomorrow afternoon. It's a 5-hour drive down there. And I said, what if he signs that contract and faxes it in before I get there with the earnest money? He said, then the owner will never know that there was another offer on the property. And I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. I mean,
you feel stuck.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I did. And the Bible has the audacity to say this in Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything.
Yeah.
But in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God.
Right.
Do not be anxious about it. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Lord, where did you come up with that one?
Right.
Anyway, I did not sleep that whole night. I just, all I could hear in my mind the whole night was that fax machine and Shell Knob printing out that contract, and it's over. Well, I get up super early, get down to Dave's office. He hands me a check. And I head for Shell Knob.
Why did Dave because you called him and then he didn't really feel like, he was supposed to buy it at that point in time, but then a few minutes later he did. Do you know what happened there?
No. Well, one, he didn't know it was for sale.
Okay,
until I called and told him that it was basically sold. He didn't even know.
Wow.
Because Joe didn't call and tell us.
Wow.
So, but at that moment, that's a really good question, because I look back on this. And for some reason, God chose that moment to put it on Dave's heart.
Wow.
You must have this property for this man's ministry.
Wow.
That's
why I asked that.
When I got to the real estate office the next day, that's the exact words that the realtor told me. Dave said, no matter what, he has to have this property for your ministry. Whew. So God had just put it on his heart.
Right then.
Yes. So I had for Shell Knob. And it's a 5-hour journey. It's 300 miles. You got to go through Kansas City. I've done many times. I've made that trip, and I'm telling, I made it in 3.5 hours that day.
I bet
I did, and I had to repent a little bit because of the minor violations of the speed limit suggestions that they put out there for you.
Right.
Actually, it's a law for anyone listening. Those are laws, and there's reasons for them. Although that day, those reasons made no sense to me whatsoever. And I also had to repent because every little old lady from Arkansas that was in my way, going too slow, I wanted heat-seeking missiles. I bet. Get out of my way. Here I come. Anyway, I made it Shell Knob. I was white-knuckled. I'm sure I was just vibrating because, I flew to Shell Knob.
Wow.
And praise the Lord, there was not a cop in the way that day to stop me.
Right.
And I'd have deserved a ticket. I'd have probably deserved to went to jail, but the Lord just let me get it there. And I ran into the real estate office with this check in my hand from Dave. And I said, I have a check from Dave for the Pine Cove Lodge property.
Were you so nervous walking in?
Man, I'm shaking. I know that I am. And I said, did the contract come in from the owner? And he said, no. And I handed him the check. Wow. And by 7:00 that night, David bought the very property that we had prayed on 17 years earlier. 17 years.
What was that like for you?
Oh, dude, I can't even describe it. Went on from there to pastor's retreat. I couldn't even tell you a single thing that any speaker said or anyone else said. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
I mean, I went from the deepest, darkest depths of despair, waiting 17 years for this, and then having it be completely over and gone, to unbelievable, miraculous things happening, you know.
I can't imagine.
And it was. You talk about going from the deepest, darkest valley to the mountaintop in warp speed. That was that experience for me.
Wow.
And so Dave purchased the property, paid an enormous, way more than the property was worth. And then the owner wouldn't even let him pay it all off. He said, no, you're going to pay half and then 8% interest for a year, and I'll let you pay the second half, which was the worst deal ever. Dave's a businessman, a very smart businessman,
right.
But he said, I don't care. I don't care. I have to have this for this man's ministry.
Wow.
And I will never forget the moment.
Gives me cold chills.
Oh, dude. When Dave handed me the deed to the property, and some of the people listening, they'll understand this, others may not. But when a person gives that kind of money, I mean, $285,000, when they give that kind of money, they typically want strings attached.
Yeah.
A lot of times. Like,
Right.
here, but,
Right.
here's this, but I want you to. Not Dave. He said one thing to me. He handed me the deed. He looked me in the eye and he said, you go do for others like you did for my boy.
No way.
That's all he said.
And you're just being faithful in a place where you didn't want to be, but you would go ahead and do it, and God honored that.
He did. And I'm not saying I didn't want to be where I was. I
Right.
mean, because I was serving God. And,
Right.
And you know, yeah, but I knew it wasn't my ultimate calling.
Exactly.
And that is frustrating to you, especially when things don't go well. You're like, yeah, I'm not even supposed to be doing this anyway, you know?
Right.
And yet God used me. And as I look back, I know that 17 years, every hardship I went through, every struggle I went through, every difficulty and heartache. And I mean, there were moments, I'm not kidding you. I remember a moment I was so deeply hurt in ministry. I asked God to just please end my life if he wanted to. Just take me, just because it hurt so deeply. And yet I know that God taught me what I needed to know during those times.
What do you think? Maybe one or two of the top things you learned in that. Obviously, patience. I mean, goodness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Have you ever really learned that? Okay. Let me finish the story. Then I'll come to that that question.
Yeah.
So, because Dave did say one more thing to me when he handed me the deed. After he said, you do for others like you did for my boy. He said, by the way, I'm going to loan you $500,000 so you can go down there and start building this camp. I'm like, no, you're not. You're kidding me? What? I mean, and he goes, you can't start a camp with $11,000. And at that point, I'm on cloud nine. I'm like, you watch me. You know, I will do it. And so, but Dave loaned us that money. My wife and I resigned our church. And February 1st, 2002, moved down there and began to build that ministry. A year later, we were able to go into the Arvest Bank in Shell Knob and get a loan and pay Dave back the $500,000 that we had borrowed from him. And we began paying the bank. This coming Thanksgiving, it'll be 6 years 6 years ago that I walked into that Arvest Bank and paid that note off 5 years ahead of schedule.
Wow.
And today we don't owe one dime to anybody. And when you look at the place that you're talking about earlier, you know, how do you own 10 Mastercraft boats? You know, how do you have the cabins and the things and then that water slide, you know, and just all, how last year, right before COVID, we didn't know COVID was coming. We spent over $300,000 on a brand new lodge building there that's beautiful. Paid for it. This is, I'll tell you what, you wait on God and you trust and you obey. And I'm not saying I did it perfectly. I'm not saying this, put Rick on a pedestal, because no way, I'll fall off and break my neck. But you just keep on going. And so what did I learn over all those years of waiting? You know, I don't know, things more than I can ever say. I'll tell you that. More than I could ever describe, I learned. But I learned how to be steadfast.
Wow.
And sometimes this journey with Christ is just about being steadfast. Every day is not a mountaintop. Every day isn't getting to eat at a Chinese buffet. Okay,
Right.
That's one of my favorite things to do.
Right.
It's not. Some days it's just tough.
Right.
And I learned not to give up. I learned how to deal with people, even difficult people. Do you know that there are some of those? Yeah. Okay.
Right.
No, I'm sorry that you know that, but you know, everyone
real.
knows. Yeah. And that's such a super part of serving God is knowing how to deal with people and even difficult people. And I learned a lot about that over those years in all those different churches where I served. I learned how to set a plan in place. And I learned how to cast a vision. And I learned how to rally people around me to help accomplish that vision. Because you know what? I'll tell you what, we are not designed or created to do this kingdom thing alone.
That's good.
We are not.
It's good.
And through this process, I learned that I need to be dependent on others. I need to be accountable to others. And this is something we need to do as the body of Christ. And a lot of hard lessons learned over those years. I learned how to build integrity into my ministry, to have a ministry that people wanted to buy into. You know, I hear a lot from youth pastors and some from senior pastors too. And they're like, no one wants to help. No one wants to get involved. No one wants to do anything, you know. And I'm just like, okay. Do you have a ministry worth buying into?
Wow, that's so good, man.
I
had a conversation this morning with a pastor talking about the same exact thing and it wasn't for them, but it was for someone else. Well, I just can't get volunteers. I can't get, and what you just said hits it right on the head.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Man, if you don't learn how to plan, this is God's kingdom work.
Yeah.
Okay, it's worthy of the very best we have to give.
Yeah.
And man, we need to learn how to plan. We need to how to set things on a calendar. And as a youth pastor in large churches where you know limited resources with church equipment and vans and space and all of that and budget, you learn to plan way ahead of time, man. And you know you got to learn to. You start when you say you're going to start. You end when you say you're going to end.
Yeah.
Okay, and it costs this much, and here's what we're going to do, and here's the purpose. You set your mission.
That's so good.
Okay, your goal, and everything you do needs to help accomplish that mission. We don't have time, energy, resources to waste on anything that doesn't help us accomplish that mission.
Right.
And so many times we just run around in circles, it seems like. But I learned that during that 17 years. I learned that. And I'll never forget the moment. This was a life-changing moment for me. Serving as my first full-time youth pastor's position was Carrollton, Texas. Dr. David Rowland was my pastor. And he's just now, in fact, his grandson was at camp this summer.
Wow.
This is so cool. And anyway, I'm down there and probably serving that church maybe about 6 months. And one day, Pastor Rowland called me into his office. And I mean, I think there's Jesus and then there's Pastor Rowland, okay? I mean, that's how highly I regard this guy. He's just amazing. And he calls me in his office. He sits me down. He looks me in the eye and he goes, I am so disappointed in you. I wanted to die. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what am I doing? And it was because I didn't know how to plan anything. I didn't get information out. Everything I did was just kind of thrown together and flying by the seat of my britches. And he's like, that will not fly. That will not fly. You will never make it in ministry. And it hurt deeply to hear those words. But you want to know what? Man, I'm like, okay. And he is a super organized person. And so instead of choosing to become bitter, I chose to become better.
Exactly.
And he helped me so much learn how to be organized and get information out and to have follow through. Yeah. How many times are events planned in the church and then, we're canceling that?
Exactly.
People have stopped believing. They will go do something. They are too busy. Money's too tight. They're gonna buy into whatever's quality and has integrity.
Preaching.
If that's not your ministry, they're not buying into your ministry.
God is a God of excellence.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you know what? Our excellence is giving him our best. And sometimes I am obviously not the brightest bulb in the drawer. Okay. All right, or in the socket, wherever you put it. I am not. At all. I am not, I can't sing. I mean, I have no music ability. I am so limited, but what I have is God's.
That's so good.
Completely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people need to know that.
That's so good, man.
God equips the called. Okay? He does. He doesn't call necessarily the equipped.
Right.
Okay? And when you read the Bible, you look at all the people God used. Very seldom did he pick up, man, that is the wisest, wealthiest, most powerful, talented dude. He's going to run this for me.
Right.
No. He chooses a guy like David.
That's so
Or
good.
Gideon. All sorts of people that
Right.
were just, yeah. And when I look at that, it encourages me because how God could choose me, I do not know.
That's so good.
But anyway, and also, I learned a couple other important things. I learned how to say I'm sorry and to admit my mistakes and to grow from them. That is so crucial. We are all going to make them. We're all going to face criticism. We're all going to be reprimanded at times. And if we will choose to allow God to use that to make us better instead of bitter, we will become so much more effective for the kingdom.
People need to hear that.
Yeah, I still need to. Okay, and probably the last thing I just want to say about that is I learned to love God and to love people. And I'm telling you, you don't have to be very talented. You don't have to have a lot of resources. When you are able to exude the genuine love of God through you to others, they are so naturally drawn to you, they can't help it.
It's so
They
good.
just cannot.
No, you're right.
They were created to know that love.
Right.
And throughout my life in ministry, I've watched God use that.
Yeah.
I just love him and I love people.
That's so
and
good.
God has used that in an amazing way.
Right.
So here I am today. Well, I think this year we went over the 27,000 mark of people that we've reached through Camp Table Rock.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you shared.
Yeah.
27,000.
Over the years.
Wow.
And I hope we're just getting started.
That's what I
for
believe.
What God wants to do.
I believe you're just getting started, man. And how many years have you been doing it now?
We've been at the camp 18 and a half years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, man, just thank you for sharing that story. I know you've done it so much, but like so many, there's so much there. I could break this down for so long because it's just, especially my generation, and especially me, I'm going to be honest, man, I need to be reminded, I need to hear those truths there, and just on a lighter note, before I get into it, have you ever talked to Wendy Joe after you had the camp and all that?
Only one time.
Okay.
And this was a few years after we got the camp. He was down in a brand new fancy Ranger bass boat fishing in our cove right next to the dock. And I happened to be down there working on the dock. And he was there and we visited just a little bit. And then he left. And then I heard a few years after that he passed away.
Really?
So,
but don't you know, when he was there on that boat that day, you said, "This is my land. This is my land." Hey, whether he was a believer or not, he saw that day.
Oh, yeah.
It worked out.
yeah,
Man,
I hope
that's
God
so powerful.
spoke to him because I know I was never. I wish a part of my story was, and one day I led Wendy Joe to Jesus. No,
But
I
you know
didn't
what?
get that opportunity.
You planted seeds, and you were faithful in it. And my last question is: Dave still alive?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Dave lives in Florida now. Actually, we just texted 2 days ago.
Wow.
And he continues to be an encouragement in my life. I try to continue to be an encouragement in his life.
Wow.
And what an incredible guy that had that faith.
Has he came to camp and seen everything?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
I bet he can't believe it.
Yeah, and for a number of years until we moved away, he stayed involved and helped us. And you look around and see certain equipment like our uniloader, different things. He donated those things to us. All the chairs you sit in the chapel, he gave us those. The big popcorn maker that makes the world's greatest popcorn. He bought an old movie theater once and had this brand new popcorn maker in it, and he gave it to us. So many things. And so much of how we design things and put things together, his influence was there.
Wow.
And I encourage him with this, that someday I can't wait until we stand before the throne of God and get to fully realize and celebrate what God did through that ministry.
Right. So powerful. And right now people are like, "Lord, please send me a Dave." Please. Right.
Oh, man.
Yeah. But sometimes,
absolutely.
Sometimes, man, the Lord can't trust us with Daves.
Yeah.
It's just real.
And obviously I wasn't ready for mine for 17 years.
And whether maybe it wasn't the right timing for students, we'll never know.
Yeah.
But here's what I know. You say 27,000, but it's hundreds of thousands because those students go home.
Yeah.
There's mom and dad. And just from, in my life, you look at the camp, man, my camp experiences has changed me. I look at my family. So when I got saved, and then I went to camp shortly after, and I was still a little bit of a hellion. Now I quit the drugs and all that, but man, rules and all that. I'm like, what are these rules, right? But I'm so glad you had them. I did. But man, I mean, you look at my biological family. I mean, there's 12 to 15 biological family members that love Jesus now, and I'm taking those truths from camp. Hey, and what's so cool is my brother, he's a sophomore now. He went to camp this past year, and I'm like, man, I was there, and I was alone. I was in a deep, dark place before Jesus. God rescues me. But I look at so many Friday night services. If you've never experienced a Camp Table Rock Friday night service, so powerful. But I would just write my family, on that piece of paper or, the sand or whatever. I'm like, Lord, I'm broken, man. Like, I don't know what to do, or not just family. I remember the Lord calling me to the ministry, and I'm like, I'm too dumb. I'm too young. I'm too this. And I just remember him at camp saying, you're going to do it. I'm like, how? Yeah. And, I've spoken at many camps, but I had yet to have the opportunity to speak at Camp Table Rock. And finally, past couple of years, or 2 years ago, I got to do that. And I was going to this year, but COVID. And I remember speaking, that first camp, and, you back there, and that was the Lord's faithfulness, in me. So definitely not, 19 years and all that. But man, for me, the Lord just said, listen, I've worked on your family. Yeah. I've called you to the ministry. Look at how I'm using you. And so, and man, you've just been a constant, in my life. And at first I was just a student. So it was from afar, like, oh, there's Rick. And then as the years have went on, we've been able to develop that relationship. And man, you've been a great friend and mentor to me, and just your steadiness. If I could tell you anything, I saw the excellence, that because you care for it. And I was telling, some friends earlier today, sometimes the biggest battles result in the greatest triumph. And sometimes God allows you to go through things that is hard, and you're waiting. And like you said, man, just that steadfastness. Because then when you come out of it, there might be another opportunity. There might be another camp. There might be another but how much God handpicked this one for you. And you had to fight for it. You had to wait. And so, there might be all this other commotion, but you're reminded, no, this is what the Lord called me to. And man, see, I hadn't heard that camp story because I guess you quit doing it for many years. And then I was there, and for the first time I heard that, and I was like, oh my gosh. Like it needs to be a movie and a book, a documentary. So we have a podcast now, right? And obviously you guys have this on video, but man, if whoever's listening to this, whether they're young or older, in the ministry or not, all of this, man, applies to people because, man, God created us on purpose and for a purpose. We say that, but it doesn't always mean that it looks like we want it to look, or at least, man, the process isn't the process we thought God would do, And man, you are, and I'm not just saying this because you're my friend and a leader, you are a model citizen of heaven, if you will, of saying, follow me as I follow Christ. I know you haven't been perfect, and it's not all Rick, but man, you are faithful, and you're willing to go through the hoops. And man, I think of the hundreds of thousands of lives that have been impacted from camp. Man, that gets me so excited because, man, like Abraham, Abraham might not be able to get all his rewards at once because, man, we're part of him. And man, with you, I feel like your obedience, all these students who are going to be pastors and lawyers and moms and that, whatever it is that are doing, man, they always have Camp Table Rock with them, And so, man, I want to tell you, thank you, brother. And I, like, it hurts me. You telling that story every time, I'm like, oh no, Lord, please, not 20 years. No, please, no. But man, Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ.
Yes.
And I can have differences with people, philosophies or whatever, even theology. But here's what I know: if there's a man or woman after God's own heart, regardless of differences, and you and I, we share so many similar ideas and all that. But even someone, say they're not like us, who a little bit different, but I see their steadiness and I see their excellence, and they're just, man, we're gonna do this the way that God's called us to do it. I respect that, and I think you guys have such a great reputation. And because you've shown such integrity in what the Lord has given you. And so, man, it's just, it's remarkable, man. And I believe, and I feel, man, you were saying that, and I just got this courage in my heart. I'm like, the story's not done. It's just starting, which you know that. But I got saved when I was 16. I'm 27 years old. I'm celebrating 10 years of saved and sober this year,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is a big year. And then COVID happened. So I'm like, Lord, this next decade, let's allow it to be different. But I believe that, man, it's just getting started. And, you have family, you have friends that are in friends that are there helping you. But, man, I believe you're raising up a whole nother generation, man, of God-fearers, and listen, it's been a hard season for a lot of people. Our world is in the unknown. But, man, I believe that God is raising up a generation of young people, man, to change this world. Man, I believe the greatest revival is yet to come. And I believe that, man. Either Jesus will come and awesome, sweet.
Yeah, that's going to be a revival.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, if not, why not now? The same God then is the same God now.
Right.
And if he can do it in him and her, why not us? And I believe that you're raising a generation. And I know it's a week of their lives, but man, it's not just about a week, it's a lifetime, and so, man, I just want to say I love you, man, and I'm so thankful for you and Rhonda, and man, and I believe that people hearing this today are reminded, don't give up.
Absolutely.
For me, I'm being real today.
Yeah.
Dylan, don't give up.
Yeah.
Keep waiting. And maybe I'm not ready yet. Or maybe then he's just, aligning some things or creating a Dave. And sometimes we got Wendy Joes. We're like, I don't like Wendy Joes,
Yeah.
But man, the same God of Dave is the same God of Wendy Joe.
Yes.
And we just got to trust the process in that,
Absolutely.
So, you've had so many good things. But as we dismiss here, what would you leave people with? Like if they're waiting on God, man, they spoke that promise. They're at youth camp and yes, here we go. And then their process looks different than they thought it would.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, okay. So I know it's an old cliche, but it's so true. God's timing is always perfect. He's never early. He's never late.
It's so good.
And when we try to put all of God in our limited brain, it's like trying to put all of Table Rock Lake into a Taco Bell cup. You can get a little bit of it in there, but you won't get it all. And we begin to put God in that limited space. We really lose perspective of who he really is. And, it is our job today to trust and obey. It's our job to give our heart, mind, soul, and strength to serve the Lord today. Tomorrow, let's repeat the process. And the next day, I have so many young people. I hire a lot of college students to work there as our staff, and they're amazing young men and women. A lot of them they're at that point in their lives, like, I don't know what God has for me. I don't know what's next, and I'm really anxious, and what's going to happen here. And I'm like, I'll tell you what you need to do today.
Yeah.
Serve the Lord your God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength.
It's good.
Tomorrow, repeat the process.
Do the next right thing.
And you wait upon the Lord.
Yeah.
He will open the doors that need to be opened, and he'll shut the ones that need to be shut. And every once in a while, we get our foot in one that closes, and it kind of hurts, but it's like a reminder of, okay, sometimes I don't do things the right way. And
That's good.
The definition of saints to me is we're sinners who, when we fall down, we choose to get back up.
So good, man.
And we're going to have a lot of days where we fall down. I know there's days that I think I take 3 steps towards God and 2 7/8 back sometimes, But each day is a journey. I want to be a little more like him today than I was yesterday.
So
I want to be I want to bring glory to his name, even if it means at my expense. That's what we have to do. And so you trust and you wait and you give your all. And the pity party is helping nobody. It's destroying you. Get out of it. Get out of it. We are called to a joyful life.
That's so good.
We are called to live abundantly, not defeated and not discouraged. And when we will just trust and serve with everything we've got,
Right.
I'm telling you, God will bring his plan about in his perfect way and in his perfect time. And if we will just truly let him be God,
Wow.
we're going to be all right.
That's so good, man. You've ministered my heart today. I promise you that, and God's faithfulness in the past gives us, hope for the future. And I bet every time you look at those buildings and you look at the lake, it's a reminder of God's faithfulness. And your faithfulness is helping me be more faithful. And for that, man, I'm eternally grateful. And I'm so thankful that you shared the story and spent time with us here today, man.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Man, God bless.
God bless you.
Make sure to subscribe to this channel so that these episodes are sent to you each month, along with our This Is My Story podcast, to share someone's story of transformation through Jesus.
Also, check out our midweek message and worship podcast that's released every Thursday. Thanks for hanging out with us.